To save the future, he had to kill his own reflection. The thought flashed through Sergeant Thorne's mind as his combat knife sparked against the Vero blade held by the man standing opposite him. The enemy wore his face. Not the weathered, scarred visage Thorne saw in the mirror every morning, but the face of his youth. Smooth, arrogant, and terrifyingly fast. This was the Mirror Cabal's masterpiece. A clone in his prime. An apex predator engineered to replace the original. Behind Thorne, High Priestess pressed her back against his, the heat of her body radiating through his torn tactical vest. He didn't just feel her physical presence. He felt her fear and her defiance vibrating in his very marrow. It was the side effect of the forbidden right that had saved him, a telepathic tether that turned two souls into a singular force of nature. The clone lunged, a blur of motion that defied standard biology. Thorne parried, gritting his teeth as the impact rattled his bones. He was slower, older, but he had something the duplicate lacked, the desperate, burning need to keep the woman behind him breathing. But 48 hours ago, the only thing burning was the sterile, recycled air of the Galactic Council. The diplomatic summit on the Zenith Spire was supposed to be a formality. Thorne stood at the edge of the grand atrium, feeling suffocated by the stiff collar of his dress uniform. He was a deathworlder in a room full of soft, high-gravity politicians, a relic of a time when peace wasn't an option. He watched Era from across the room. She was luminous, her voice a calm melody amidst the squabbling delegates. She spoke of unity, but Thorne's eyes scanned for threats, his Terran spirit unable to settle. It happened in the blink of an eye. The glass ceiling shattered, raining crystalline shards like diamonds. A squad of heavy world mercenaries, hulking brutes the Marines colloquially called space orcs, dropped onto the dais, weapons charging with a high-pitched whine. The security detail froze, overwhelmed by the sudden violence. But old soldiers don't fade away. They stand when others run. Thorne was moving before the first scream echoed. He vaulted the table, human ingenuity taking over where protocol failed. He didn't fire. He tackled Era, covering her body with his own just as the assassin's rifle discharged. The impact was a sledgehammer of heat. The plasma round meant to vaporize the High Priestess slagged Thorne's armor and seared into his chest. He collapsed, gasping, the smell of ozone and cooked meat filling his nose. The room erupted into chaos, but Thorne's world narrowed to Era's face hovering over him. The medics were shouting that it was hopeless, that his physiology was too damaged. Era silenced them with a look of terrifying resolve. She knew that peace isn't signed with ink, but bought with scars. Ignoring the terrified protests of the science fiction story fanatics who believed mixing noble and soldier blood was heresy, she initiated the resonance rite. She sliced her palm, then his. As their blood mingled, a shock wave of energy, pure and white-hot, surged through Thorne. It wasn't just biology. It was the raw essence of humanity fusing with her psionic lineage. He gasped, his eyes snapping open, no longer seeing just the ceiling, but feeling the rhythmic thrum of her heart beating in time with his own. A bond forged in plasma fire and forbidden blood had just been born. And it was the only thing standing between the galaxy and total annihilation. The connection between them flared, hot and blinding, snapping Thorne back to the lethal reality of Station Omen. The clone didn't just move. He flowed like mercury, his strikes calculated by an algorithm of violence that no standard human ingenuity could predict. Thorne blocked a blow that numbed his entire arm, the sheer kinetic force driving him to one knee. This was the terrifying potential of an uninhibited apex predator. Humanity, stripped of its conscience and engineered for slaughter. Get up! Era's voice wasn't just in his ears. It was an electrical impulse firing directly into his motor cortex. Through their blood bond, she poured her own stamina into his failing reserves. Thorne roared, the sound raw and defiant, a testament to the stubborn Terran spirit that refused to break. He surged upward, catching the clone off guard, not with speed, but with the reckless unpredictability that defined his species. The clone sneered, a perfect mirror of arrogance. You were obsolete, old man. Thorne spat blood. Maybe, but I'm not alone. Era didn't need a weapon. She was the weapon. Focusing the resonance of their shared trauma, she unleashed a psychic shock wave that slammed into the clone's mind. It wasn't enough to kill, but it was enough to make the younger version of Thorne hesitate for a microsecond. That fraction of time was all Thorne needed. True leadership requires personal risk and vulnerability, and Thorne spent it all in one gamble. He dropped his guard, inviting a fatal strike to the chest. The clone took the bait, driving his Vero blade forward. Thorne twisted at the last second, the superheated metal searing a trench along his ribs, missing his heart by millimeters. Trapped inside the clone's reach, Thorne drove his combat knife upward under the rib cage, piercing the heart that had never beaten for anything other than war. The clone gasped, the light fading from eyes that looked too much like Thorne's own. As the body slumped, the facility around them began to tremble. The charges Thorne had set were primed. "We have to go," Era whispered, her hand finding his. The electricity of proximity was no longer just survival. It was a promise. They ran, fighting back to back through the corridors of the crumbling station, gunning down the remaining mercenaries as the structure fractured into starlight behind them. Years later, the silence on the ranch was not heavy, but golden and vast. The wheat fields swayed under the twin suns, a peaceful contrast to the cold void of the past. Thorne sat in his chair, his breathing shallow, his body finally failing after decades of borrowed time. But the galaxy was safe. The Mirror Cabal was ash. Standing before him were the first captains of the Aegus Corps, a new peacekeeping force built on the doctrine that strength without connection is tyranny. They were his legacy, proof that a legacy is defined by difficult choices, not biological perfection. Era knelt beside him, her hand gripping his, the old scar on her palm pressing against the matching one on his. The resonant blood transfusion that had once saved him now hummed with a gentle final lullaby. She didn't weep. They had stolen decades from fate. "It's time to rest, Sergeant," she said softly. Thorne looked at the horizon, then at her. He didn't see the end. He saw the future. He had killed his own reflection to save. He closed his eyes, content in the knowledge that while bodies perish, the HFY spirit, that indomitable will to protect, would outlast the stars themselves. Please follow my channel for more videos. One click from you can change my life.